Wedding signs. What do you really need for your wedding and what can you omit? Hello and congratulations on your engagement. It's such an exciting time. And first and foremost, I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Jess and I'm a wedding planner in Los Angeles, California. So I'm here on YouTube to help you and give you advice as a newly engaged couple on how to plan your wedding in the most efficient way possible. In this video, we're going to be talking about wedding signs and what you might need and not need to plan your wedding. So stick around and let's dive right in. Okay, so wedding signs. There are so many different signs that you can have at your wedding, and whether you think you need every single sign possible because you might think your family and friends might not know where to go, or you think it's not really necessary, what is actually essential in a wedding, stick around to the end of this video and by the end of it you'll know exactly what you're going to need to purchase or DIY on your own. So wedding signs, do you really need them? Do you not need them? Every single wedding is different. No wedding is the same. So let's go ahead and let's start with the welcome sign. I do think that welcome signs are important to have in weddings because it's kind of like a directional sign, if you will, showing people this is where our wedding's at. If your wedding is happening around the same time or same part as another event that's going on with that venue, and yes, there are venues who will book out their venue kind of like a factory house and have different rooms where an event, a baby shower might be happening on that exact time and that exact day and they're just next door. It could be a conference or it could be just another wedding. If your venue is something like that, you will definitely need a welcome sign, so you'll make sure that your guests are at the right wedding. It's also one of those signs where it will point them into the right direction and they'll be like, okay, we are at so-and-so's wedding. So I highly recommend a welcome sign, but it's totally up to you guys. 99% of the couples that I work with do have wedding signs, welcome signs. While we're on the topic of directional signs, let's go into parking. So if your venue, you can tell, is kind of hard to find, you'll definitely want parking signs or pointing signs that says ceremony this way, reception this way, something to that nature. It could be like a picket type of fence looking thing that you chisel on into like the grass and you know it'll be pointing left or right, whichever way the direction is. If the venue is quite large and it's going to be confusing for your guests to find where the ceremony will be taking place, then you would really want to make sure to have those directional signs. I've seen people, you know, even go to the extent of tying balloons, and it just, people can, they understand where it is. Like, it's totally up to you guys whether you feel the need to have directional signs. I'd say if it's very self-explanatory at the place that you're getting married and people know where it is, or let's say if it's at your house, maybe it's not really needed. But if it's a really large venue and you just know that they're going to get confused, I would recommend getting parking signs or some kind of directional sign, so that way guests will easily find where they can park and where the ceremony will be held and they won't be late. Unplugged wedding signs. This is my favorite one. I love seeing unplugged signs. It's something that 70% of the guests will see, mainly because some guests just don't read. It's not something that's completely necessary at your wedding, although I do see a lot more weddings having unplugged signs for the very reason that you pay so much money for the photography and videography that you really don't want your guests' phones and like this whole ordeal thing going on in your photos as you're walking down the aisle and the recessional. It really like enhances the photos when the guests are 100% like in the moment, enjoying the moment without worrying about, oh, I need to capture this like on camera. I think the very exception to that is if a guest is out of town, they couldn't make it all of a sudden, and you know that family member or friend is doing them a favor by, you know, being able to capture that moment on behalf of you, live or you know, something like that. But having every single or majority of the guests having their phones out, it really makes a difference on the photos and videos. So the more present they are, the better it would be. And that's kind of digressing the point of it, but I love unplugged ceremony signs, but is it necessary to really have? No, and here's why. Your officiant can very much tell your guests, we are going to take a moment to silence your cell phones and turn them off as the couple requests to have an unplugged ceremony and would like everybody to be present. Don't worry, the photography and videography will be shared to you in the future, but as of right now, they really want all of us to be in the moment. So if you can take your phones out and devices, we would appreciate it. And that is something super simple that you can ask the officiant, ask your planner to ask the officiant to do, and you don't have to spend so much money on the unplugged ceremony sign. So it's not necessary, but people definitely love having the unplugged ceremony sign at their weddings. Okay, the most infamous one where I see choose a seat, not a side type of ones. I mean, I've seen them. And that's if you're really not having like an usher or someone to really guide them where they can go. The most important people that you would want to know where they're sitting are the reserve seats. Those people who would be in your first row and second row if they're not a part of the processional and you want them to sit a certain area. If you're not going to have an usher or someone to guide them where they're going to be sitting, and let's say you really don't care if, you know, the groom side sits on one side and blah, blah, blah. And I think that's a very traditional thing from the past. And I feel like in today's society, like with weddings, it doesn't matter what side you're on, just sit down and enjoy the ceremony. So I don't think that that is a necessary sign to have. I think people will be self-explanatory to, you know, just choose a seat. But if you wanted to have it, you definitely can. But I feel like if you have an usher or someone to guide people where they're going to be sitting, then the sign isn't necessary. While we're on the topic of ceremonies, reserve seating. This is one of the things that I think is so important to have, and that is because you have, you know, what if you have your parents or your grandparents or godparents or certain friends and family members, and especially kids who are part of that processional, walking down the aisle. You want to make sure that they have a seat when they're walking down and that they have, you know, somewhere to sit, and it's not like people have already sit at their spots and that they're already sitting, you know, at the third, fourth, or last row of the wedding. Like, you really don't want that to be awkward. So having reserved seating is a must for me as a planner. And whether you're a type A type of bride or you just kind of really don't care and, you know, you don't care where everyone just sits, and it's just like as long as you have this first and second row reserved where people know not to sit there, then that's fine. But if you're like me and you're like, no, grandma's specifically sitting here, mom and dad are sitting specifically here, or whatever it may be, certain family situations, like if there's certain family members that don't talk or whatever, then, you know, you want to like make sure that they sit at a certain area. I loved having reserved seating. It makes things go so much easier, prevents less fighting. I love it so much that I require it for all of my weddings to have reserved seating, whether it may be specific names that I need to help reserve for the ceremony, or if it's just reserve row 1 and row 2, that's good. The last thing we need is just, you know, when you walk down the aisle, there's people already sitting at that seat and your parents are not even in the front row to watch you say I do. And so reserved seating for me is a plus. That is something you definitely want to do. Do you need to invest so much money in reserved seat? No, definitely not. You can do acrylic, you can do wood. What I do is I literally just get a piece of white paper and a Sharpie and I write reserved on it, because it's going to, like, the ceremony, if it's non-denominational, it's going to last like 20 minutes. And to spend so much money on a reserved sign, like, unless you want photos of that, cool, but if not, you literally can just put like a Sharpie with white paper, stick it on the back lumbar part of the chair. Guests won't see it unless they you know, go to the first row, look at it and say, oh, it's reserved. Hope that makes sense. Comment below if it doesn't, but I'm pretty sure it's self-explanatory. But yeah, reserved seating, super important. Here comes the bride or groom sign. This is something that's so cute for the ring bearer to have and hold in their hand if they're not having a pillow, if they're not having anything to really like, you know, keep them distracted, or if you're not having a ring bearer or flower girl, then it's not something that's necessary. But it's really, really cute to have signs like that. I've seen signs where it's like, don't worry ladies, I'm still single type of thing. If you have a bell, if you have, you know, the flower girl or boy, like, you know, throwing petals and whatever it might be, it's up to you what you want the kids, if you have kids involved in this wedding, to hold. I've seen adults be the flower girl and ring bearers, so it's something that's cute to have, but it's not necessary. An order of events sign. So if you plan on not using programs, which that's also a different topic, but something that I think gets thrown away really easily, an order an event sign is really cool to have because it tells your guests at least some points of the wedding where it's going to be or what time it's going to be. Guests are actually really nosy to find out when they're going to be fed, when cocktail hour is, when the ceremony is supposed to start, and especially if you have a send-off, it's pretty important because if the send-off is like at 8 or 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock p.m. and guests are leaving at earlier than that, especially more elderly guests, you want them to at least know like, hey, this is coming up, it's a special moment for us. If you'd like to stick around, amazing, but if not, that's totally cool. And so having an order of events, especially for send-offs or something in particular that's happening, like a cultural dance or something that you want your guests to really be involved in, then an order of events sign is something that I highly recommend. But I don't see it often in weddings, but I do think it's something that more weddings should do, aside from, you know, the welcome sign and the reserved seating. So it's totally up to you if you can afford or make an order of events sign, but if not and you feel it's efficient enough to like have it on your wedding website, or if you do want to do the alternative of having traditional programs or even have it on your menu cards, then that's your choice. Alright, so most of those items are what you'll see at a ceremony. Next, we're going to dive into the things that you'll see at a reception part of your wedding. Okay, so as soon as your guests come to the reception, a lot of what you had at the ceremony you might repurpose to the reception, especially if they're in different locations. You might repurpose your welcome sign, but when people enter, after they see the welcome sign at the reception, next thing is the welcome table, and that is going to be possibly a guest book where people can sign in. If you're doing it traditionally, if you have something more creative, I've seen nowadays this cool phone, this vintage phone that people can, you know, pick up the phone and say their message, and you can actually get a voice recording of all of your guests that are saying their well wishes to you. There are, you know, canvases where people can write their names and sign it, and you can display that. There are, you know, wooden hearts that I've seen where people sign it and they put it in a slot, and then you can display it on your house. I've seen a lot of different ways. You can get very creative with the guest book, but what I'm trying to make a point at is, do you need a guest book signage? And really, that's if you have a specific direction for how you want your guests to sign it. If it's like they just have to like input their signature or well wishes or maybe their current address, and it's more traditional that way, it's pretty obvious you don't really need the sign. But if it's something more rigorous where, you know, let's say it's even a Polaroid and they have to take a picture, they sign it, they put the washi tape, all of that stuff, you'll definitely want to sign for that to let them know step 1, step 2, step 3, give them the direction of it. So in that case, if you're doing something like that and it's not as traditional or it's something that might confuse guests, I would for sure have a sign about it. But if it's something you don't think is necessary, then it's probably not necessary. Next is a gifts and cards sign. Typically, I've seen people merge the welcome table where they'll have the welcome guest book thing, and then they'll also have the gifts and cards in one table, or they'll have 2 separate tables. I think that really depends on your guest count. But to have a gifts and cards, is it necessarily no? Is it helpful? Yes. if you have like a card box and it's obvious that's where the cards go, people will understand that and they'll definitely put the cards and the gifts right where it's supposed to be. But you would definitely want to have someone keep an eye out for the gifts and the cards, because the last thing you would need is for that to go missing and we don't know where it went. So make sure you're placing that at a safe area where it's not just grab and go and someone can just take it. But yes, it is not necessary to have a gifts and cards sign, but you definitely can have one if you think you need one. If you already have like a card box and it's obvious, then I would say ditch the sign. The next thing is a seating chart. This is very important. You have to have a seating chart at your wedding. Some couples that I've worked with don't think it's really necessary, and you know, from somebody who hasn't, you know, planned weddings before, I can totally understand how it's like, you know, we're really laid back, we don't really think it's necessary. I can understand how you might think that. But I've had really bad experiences where there is no seating chart and the mother of the groom wanted to fight me. And we'll never go back to that experience again. And that is mainly because there were no seating charts. People can sit wherever they want. They didn't care about it. The mother did. Yeah, she cared. And because her family wasn't sitting more closer to the bride and groom, she was really upset and blamed it on me as the planner that it was my fault, which it wasn't. That was the wishes of, you know, the couple. And so basically when I worked with weddings where there's a seating chart, everyone just accepts that's where the couple wants me to sit. I'm gonna sit here. So definitely love having a seating chart. You can have a seating chart where you have people specifically assigned to sit at a certain area, or you can have it where it's like, these 10 people sit at table 7. And I don't care where exactly they sit on table 7, as long as they sit on table 7. It is amazing if you have a buffet and people can just get their food. But if you're having a plated meal, it is most important to have a seating chart and know where people are sitting, because you would want to have the caterer team know and indicate who chose steak, who chose chicken, who chose veggie, who chose salmon, whatever the meals might be. So a seating chart and escort cards, or however you want to do that, I've seen amazing like creative ideas on how to do those, and you can definitely Pinterest them, but seating chart is a must. Oh, and don't forget that if you're having an escort card or seating chart or whatever, you would want to do it alphabetically, not by table number. And that is because you can do it by last name and it would be so much easier for people to find their table. Let's just say you have 15 tables and Alex is going to be sitting on table 15, and it takes him from table 1 to go scroll all the way to table 15 just to see that he's on table 15. That takes a lot of time in order for someone to find their seat. And if they were alphabetized by their last name first, and they just know, like, it's obvious it goes by last name and it tells them, boom, your table number 15, like, okay, my last name is DeLeon, boom, go to D, C, 15, Alex DeLeon at 15, and then he can just go to table 15. It's more efficient that way, because when you're having people see where they're sitting, you would want them to sit down. You really want them to get to their table because the grand entrance is about to happen. So I would make sure to have it alphabetically. Another important one that you definitely want to have is table numbers, and especially facing them at the direction that guests are walking in. So it's legible, it's clear that they can see these are all the tables where they're going to be, and it's not hidden where they have to go to the table and figure out, what table number is that? Or if you're assigning the table to be, you know, you're making it be like, this is, you know, the title of this table, like this is the Cancun table and this is the London table, or however you want to do it. As long as it's legible and people can see it, amazing. Table numbers are a must. I'm gonna go with a more miscellaneous type of signs, and that would mean having a memorial sign and a bar sign, give or take. And so a memorial sign would basically be a section of the wedding where you'll have maybe candles and pictures of loved ones who are no longer with us and you would like to honor them in a certain way. And then a bar sign would be something like, you know, your favorite cocktail drinks and maybe the ingredients that come with those drinks that guests can order, or what type of beers, wines, spritz non-alcoholic drinks or cocktails that you have within the menu that they can choose, and it's so much easier for people to just see it and order it, and then they can head out to, you know, go mingle with friends and family. Or if the wedding is, let's say, an open bar, or if it's not an open bar, you can definitely have a sign for that. And then another thing is if it's a dry wedding, which means that there's no alcohol and you're just gonna have mocktails for the wedding, then that is also a sign that you can have. So miscellaneous items such as the memorial table or bar table, do you think it's completely necessary to have all those things? No, I do not. Other things that you can probably do miscellaneous is having like a dessert sign. If you want to add in the time of when guests can start taking the dessert, then that's also something that's like, oh, you know, courteously, like, I won't take the dessert because cake time is at 8 o'clock or whatever it might be. And let's say favors, like if you are a fan of having favors at your wedding and you want guests to like take one or something like that, if it's not at every seat or to that extent, then that's also a miscellaneous sign that you can also add, but none of these are really not necessary. Other miscellaneous ones can be a hashtag. So if you have a hashtag for your wedding and you want people to share that on social media or somehow, you know, feeling the urge to have a hashtag for your wedding, you can have various signs like at the photo booth, or if you're going to have like love quotes or Bible verses or something that's incorporated in your wedding, you can also have those. They're definitely not necessary, but you could for sure have them if it's a part of, you know, something that's very special to you guys, and definitely do it. And then another one is a head table sign or a sweetheart table sign. You know, you can have it as Mr. and Mrs., Mr. and Mr., Mrs. and Mrs. You can have your last name, you can have your hashtag kind of located on there, you can have love on that table. Do I think it's necessary? No, I think it's pretty obvious that it's your table, especially if there's 2 seats there, or if it's a long table and you have your wedding party sitting next to you. I think it's pretty obvious. So I don't think that it's a necessary thing, but you can for sure add them in. I've seen them done to many weddings, but I really like the flowers to do all the talking, so I'm not really a fan of having signs. More like they're like wooden cutout signs that actually spell L-O-V-E, and it's your choice if you like them and to add them or not. Whew, okay, that was a lot of signs, and I hope by now you have a clear idea of if you really need it at your wedding or if you just not gonna have it. That is all I have for you for today's video. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end and watching it. I look forward to seeing you at the next video. If you'd love to comment below, heart it, all of the things, and I will see you guys next time.